It's Pete from Cheap Homesteading, and today we're working on the Massey 35 with the Continental Z134 motor. We are continuing on the engine rebuild. Yesterday we did the pistons, connecting rods, and checked the clearance on the rod bearings. That is all done, and now we're going to be swapping out the main bearings. When I pulled this thing apart, I saw that all the bearings were really wore out. I think it just had a lot of use. They were wore, so I tracked down from Faucet Tractor Supply some 30 over bearings because this crank has been cut down to 30 over. The rod bearings were dead on, perfect. So we're gonna hope that happens when I put the main bearings in. So we're gonna roll them in, we're not gonna take the crank out. So if you're doing an in-frame rebuild where you just pull the pan off, you can actually roll in main bearings and check it without taking the engine out of the unit. I'm kind of going to do the same thing, but it's on an engine stand. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to roll in main bearings and check the clearance. We're going to start removing the main bearings. Your oil pump is your front main bearing. There's a main bearing in the center. And then this one kind of is part of your oil seal. This piece removes. We'll cut the wire, pull the bolts, and see if we can get this thing out of here. I seem to have lost all my pliers. Keep wiggling it. There we go. It is loose. Wiggle back and forth. There you go. The crank looks really, really good. You can't feel anything with your fingernail. That is kind of the test. If you can feel it with your fingernail, it's almost too much. But man, the crank does look really, really good. So now we just have to remove the back main bearing holder, and that is the whole back part of the engine that goes around the oil seals. We just got to remove these two little bolts there, and then the rod bearings, and then I think it's just gonna pop right out of there. Man, that's tight. You can't get the bearing out. You will give it a gentle tap. I don't think you want to hit too hard. There we go. That's out. I'm glad I decided to change the bearings because that's going to be a problem just down the road. So there you go. We're going to start installing the new bearings. We are going to unpack new main bearings from Faucet Tractor Supply. So basically when you're rolling in bearings, you're basically using the crank to roll the bearing in and out of the block. Because you're not removing the crank, you can't get the bearings out, so you kind of have to slide it in with the crank. So first I'm going to remove the old bearings, and then we're going to try to roll in the first one. It's really hard to show you, but what I did was pry between the bolt and here, so I push it tighter against the crank, then roll the crank over and it rolled it out. So now you check your new bearing, make sure it's in the correct location, clean off the area. We're gonna put that back down into here. We're gonna put the oil pump back on, which is the top part of your cap. Well, not fully the top part of your cap, but it's what the bolts pull on. Okay. Let's see if we can roll this one. Maybe this one will go easier. I'm gonna gently push. That doesn't work. I am gonna have to tap it gently out. So there you go. Throw some fresh oil on it, clean off the crank. Okay, so I'm just gonna gently push on the edge of the bearing just to help it along its journey. So now we got the main bearings all rolled in. We have to check it with a plastic gauge. It's another morning and we are back at it. I am going to plastic gauge the main bearings. We're going to torque them down, make sure that's all good, and then we can do our final torque. We're going to get the plastic gauge. On the other video, I explained how plastic gauge works, but in case you didn't watch the video, I'm going to do a quick explanation. Plastic gauge is a little piece of plastic that you put in between the journal or the rod bearing, and when you tighten it down, it squishes it. So you get your wrapper, you line it up to the width of these marks, like the red width or the white one here, whichever one's the closest. And when you get it to us the same size, then there's a dimension associated with that width. And then you know how much clearance you have in your main bearing or your rod bearing. You take a piece of plastic gauge, you lay it lengthwise across the crank like this, where the main bearing is, and then you tighten down the cap. The cap back on. And the torque is 85 to 95, so we're gonna go to 95. Now we'll take it off. A tap. There we go. Okay, so if you see there, that's 2/1000ths of an inch, and it kind of lines up with that. For the MF 165, all other models, it is the Continental gas. Here's your clearance, it's 0.0005 to 0.0027. My dimension is 0.002, so we are right in that. So now we can just throw the cap back on and torque it down, and this one's done. We're gonna do the rear main bearing now. This one's kind of annoying to get out. There we go. There we go. To me, that looks good. This is a two-piece main bearing because you got your oil pump built right into it. And you've got a bottom piece here. There we go. Okay, so now we got to put it back all together. Make sure you plastic gauge everything. It isn't worth it just to guess or just say it's going to be okay, because you're going to go through all this and then all of a sudden you're going to take out your crank or something like that. So it's not worth it. You really do need to plastic gauge everything. On this engine, the front and the back main bearings are a little annoying because you got to take the oil pump on the front, and the back one, it's part of the block, and that's kind of tough to get it out, but it's definitely worth to make sure you check it. Actually, this one is about 3/1000ths of an inch, but that's within spec too, because it's 3003. So I don't know why this one's a bit different, but it's still within spec. So the main bearings have been plastic gauged and torqued, and now we're going to put the lock wires on the bolts. There you go. Cut off the excess. There we go. Okay, so we're going to install the oil pickup. So now we're going to wire up the middle main bearing. Now we're going to twist both the wires together. So the wires are on. So basically you string it through the holes, you twist it together, then you twist all of it so it's relatively tight. You don't want this loose. You don't want it wobbling with the engine running. The engine's kind of a rough running engine as it is, and you don't want it to just be vibrating around till the wire breaks. So same with this one. So we got them wired up. So now we just have to check end play, and then we should be good to go. Now we're going to check the end play of the crank. I probably would have done this when I plastic gauged the mains, but you know, I forgot, and I just thought, oh, we better check it now. So I'll show you how to do that. So basically, crank end play is how much the engine moves forward and back inside the block. So these are the old main bearings, so I can show you. These are the thrust washers. This is what stops your crank from going forward and back. One side always gets worn more on these tractors because when you push the clutch, you're pushing the whole crank forward. So that is what that is. So that's what we're measuring. That is at 0, and then I'm going to pry it back. And that is 25, 26, 27 thousandths of an inch. So we're going to check in our book. The normal end play is 4 thousandths to 8 thousandths of an inch. My goodness, mine is 27 thousandths of an inch. More than double, like. So you know what, when I did the main bearings, everything matched 30 under. They cut down the crank to 30 under, rods, mains, everything. But I don't know what happened to the thrust surfaces, because when I checked the thrust bearings, it is way over. Maximum is supposed to be 8,000. I've got like 27,000. So it really moves. I know these old tractors, they do wear out that way a lot because you're pushing the clutch. And when you're pushing the clutch, it kind of just pushes the whole crank this way. So you know what? It's something I don't like, but I think we're just going to leave it the way it is, and we're going to run it because I'm not going to get another crank for it. The amount of play isn't what took out the engine. It was the valve dropping, and I don't see any damage or that it's moving too far or anything like that. And we got new bearings with new thrust washers built into them. So I think, you know what? I think we are going to just put this thing back together. I hate that. The last thing, everything else was spec and beautiful, and then the end play's a little off. So I don't know. We are just going to leave it. You know, if it breaks, I'm going to be the one fixing it. So maybe I'll regret this, but you know what? You can't. These engines are old. They're just, you can't fix everything. Oh, that is so annoying. Just has a little bit too much end play. See, these are the old bearings. So when someone pushes against the clutch, it pushes the crank forward and it wears that surface. So I can't imagine the play that this bearing had. Now we put new bearings in there. It has to be better than it was. It's just really annoying. Everything else is too spec, and then that is off. So man, oh man, it is what it is. Okay, so now we are going to change the rear main seal. There we go. The lip of the seal always goes towards the oil. If you put it in backwards, the actual oil will just work its way by. So you got to make sure that the lip is towards the block. Okay, so you got your nice new gasket. We're going to spray it with high tack. So you just got to make sure that they all line up good. Oh, the gasket's on backwards. Got to go this way then. So my little line-up pins line up. Just going to put a little bit of engine oil or white grease to allow the seal to slide on nice. You have to be careful with the seal. You don't want to roll it, so I kind of put it on an angle. I pull up a little bit, and then I just work it around. You don't want to roll the seal. There you go. A little bit of Loctite on the bolts. I don't want them coming out. There's 2 bolts that go in from the inside, and they have little brass washers. So the main bearings are installed, everything is torqued and wired, and the pickup is bolted down. Rear main is installed, so this is looking good. So there you go, the main bearings are in, everything is done. You know, it's been plastic gauged. I wish the end plate was better, but it is what it is. And you know what, it's probably gonna run a long time with the amount of end play it does have. Because those old bearings had a lot of wear on them, and it has to be better than that. So we're done the crank, we're gonna put the oil pan on tomorrow, and then we're gonna start putting the head on. So it's kind of getting exciting. So that's about enough for today. You guys have a good one.